What up, everybody? JP Finlay, Redskins Talk Podcast. We are back after a lot of action on draft weekend. Mitch Tischler and Pete Hailey are here. Boys, everybody catch up on sleep? Doing okay now?
Oh, yeah. Feeling good.
I think I'm staying up later now playing Call of Duty, but that's a personal decision, not a team decision. It's my fault.
Yeah, this video game habit of yours. So Pete is in a big hurry to get the intro for today's podcast done. We have a ton of good interviews coming your way, so it's not going to be a lot of us bantering. I kind of think Pete is in a hurry to get this done so he can go play more video games. Am I right?
Yeah, the TV's actually on. My PlayStation is in sleep mode, so I can start it quicker than just starting it from off. So, yes, you're correct.
I kind of could tell because Mitch, all of his texts, he's like, yeah, let's do it now. Yeah, let's do it now. Yeah, let's do it early. Did you notice that?
People give Dwayne a hard time about their social media. Pete, we got to give you a hard time about your video games.
Maybe.
I mean, kids are kids.
Yeah.
All right. This is going to be a packed interview podcast. I talked to Peter King. He had some really good kind of news nuggets. We disagreed on something that I think maybe I'm seeing on a different level. I don't know. We'll let you guys take your own opinion. I love the line he had about Adrian Peterson. I'm going to blog that later in the week. Then all three of us got to talk to Florida State head coach Mike Norvell. Why is that relevant? Well, he coached Memphis last year, and he coached Antonio Gibson. His comment – let me see if I have my notes still. The words he said about Antonio Gibson.
Glowing praise.
Give me a quick let's do this real quick. I want to thank the good folks, Oarsman Automotive of Virginia. We ride with them. Want you to do the same thing. Go check out Oarsman Chantilly Kia. They'll take care of anything you want. I don't know what's going to happen because I love my current 4Runner, but I'm telling you, I always talk about that Telluride. I think the Telluride might be a little more family-friendly. We'll see what happens with my next car. But the thing I'll never go backwards on that the 4Runner has is the back window that goes down. My guy Banks, once he figured out that was his spot, loves it back there.
You've got two new cars in the past year and change or so it can't be too soon for the Telluride.
Your ADD carries over into vehicles too, huh? That's remarkable.
My what?
Your ADD, you're just all over the place, and I didn't think it would affect your vehicle choice, but it certainly does, it seems like.
Well, Peter, perhaps I'm just trying to sell some Kias on one hand. But at the thing, yeah, my ADD's nonstop, dude. You guys know me pretty well. This craziness don't sleep, man. Anyway,
the best part of that Norvell interview was him talking about SMU, the game that Antonio Gibson had against him. That was when he started breaking down the numbers of punt return or kick returns, passing, receiving.
Staggering.
Wild.
So we're gonna set our the listeners that would be into this kind of thing. I'm talking about Mark Perina, Yamaguchi, like that crowd. This is a drinking game. You have to drink every time you hear the word versatility, home run, tough to tackle, can't miss, or possibilities are endless. How does that sound?
I do that myself.
We got to keep – people are not going to make it through the interview.
Yeah, what the hell?
Your college head coach is supposed to be excited about your prospects in the pros, but Mike Norvell came across so genuine and sincere, and his excitement about Antonio Gibson, and then talking to Ron and like doing some digging. I don't know. There's a lot of excitement about that kid. And then our last interview, listen, it was Mitch's interview. He has the contact. Take it away, big man.
Friday night, ESPN is going to have their Project 11 behind the scenes with Alex Smith's recovery, and got to speak with Stephania Bell, who's the injury analyst for ESPN. She's the reporter on the piece. She's basically been embedded with Alex since January and has spent countless hours with him. It's incredible hearing her talk about his recovery and everything he went through, but there are some good little nuggets in there about, his family and his kids, how they kind of handled it, and she ends it with an interesting little piece about whether she thinks he's going to play in the NFL again.
Juicy. Well, and Mitch, you mean January 2019, right?
January 2019. Yes, January 2019.
Yeah, Shelby Lou, what are you doing, babe?
I wanted somebody to push me on the castle.
Okay, give me 2 more minutes. I'll come out there.
Okay.
Say hi to Mr. Pete and Mr. Mitch.
Hi, Mr. Pete. Hi, Mr. Mitch.
I like your jacket, Shelby.
That's when Daddy sweatshirt.
Fits you perfectly.
For the folks on YouTube, you'll probably – did you guys see her come in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right over your shoulder.
Very athletic in that sweatshirt.
Yeah. She looks like she's dressed like a big man. I thought you'd like that.
I just want to add, I was had the luxury of watching Mitch talk to Stephania. The Alex Smith storyline is one everybody's really familiar with, but the way she describes it and the questions Mitch asked are compelling, and you maybe think, oh, I've heard all that I need to hear. You're going to hear a lot more you didn't know, and it was just really powerful. So be sure to listen and then watch the documentary on Friday. Strong stuff all around.
Indeed. Well done, big man. Can we thank an intermediary there or no?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, whatever. I'll text you. Or does the chat show up on YouTube?
No. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Tell us what you're talking about.
Oh, all right. Never mind then. So, maybe Shelby should walk back in. So one thing I want to handle real quick before we go to all the interviews, because they're really good, is Ron Rivera did a really good interview with Kevin Sheehan on Kevin's morning show on 980, talking about kind of everything. And he talked about his excitement for Sadiq Charles, which I know the big man loves. And he talked about, the draft and how everything's coming together for the Skins and all that stuff. But one thing that kind of got thrown out there at the end, which made kind of the blog buzz, was that Rivera said that there was an opportunity. It's his understanding there was an opportunity last year to trade Trent for a first-round pick, and he's not sure why, but the deal never got done. And I wrote a blog on this, and I said Rivera was much too gracious with his commentary, because we all know why a deal never got done, because Bruce Allen didn't want a deal to get done. And Rivera continued to say, and I'm not sure why his value plummeted. And his value plummeted because he sat out the whole year. He only has 1 year left on his contract rather than 2. And it showed just that this whole thing could go so poorly. And it reflected poorly on the Redskins and on Trent and everything else. And there's not – so I brought this up to Mitch, and I thought he had the perfect line. Because I was like, do we need to talk about this? Like, what is to gain? And Mitch is like, let's just bag on Bruce one more time. And you're right. Like, it's still staggering how bad of a decision that was.
I mean, we've ad nauseum talked about how bad Bruce was, especially when it comes to this Trent Williams situation. And it's as bad as it was a year ago when he didn't make the deal, when they kind of knew that Trent wasn't going to play. So let's all get one more, guffaw out of, how Bruce Allen, lit the ship on fire on his way out of town.
Yeah, my reaction was, duh. Ron Rivera has a brain the last time I checked, and so while he's polite and won't say it, he's well aware why Trent Williams wasn't traded and why that deal fell apart and why his value plummeted. Everybody knows why. My mom knows why. Shelby knows why. Every single person on the world knows that Bruce Allen botched it from the start.
Shelby is very excited about Chase Young, by the way. I think some of it's just because she knows his name, but she asks me about him all the time.
Well, tell us about this little kid that you talked to last night on Zoom.
That was cool, right? Did you guys see that video?
Yeah.
I saw the video, yeah.
So the kid was his name's Chase Bozanak. That video got sent to me by a good friend of the podcast. So I'm not going to say who, but you guys might be able to guess. I don't know. The kid's dad is a Wisconsin fan, and they were watching Ohio State play Wisconsin when Chase just destroyed the Badgers. So the kid decided, hey, that guy's my favorite player, because both their first names were Chase. And then he became a Redskins fan. The dad's a Giants fan, and now his kid's a Skins fan. His dad is just getting really, really punched in the gut by Chase Young with his oldest son. And I told the family, they were super nice, good people. I said, if you come down to Richmond or to a game, let us know. We'll try to take care of you. But that's a fun story. It's available. You can see the video on our website if you want to. I think we got too much meat to talk about potatoes right now. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pete, you want to tell everybody your video game nickname or whatever it's called?
No, my gamer tag. No, people have been Instagram DMing me. I roll with a pretty tight squad. And again, we don't need to talk about potatoes. There's so much meat. We should get to that.
Yeah, but I kind of want to out you, especially if you're bad.
I'm definitely bad. If I was a past Redskin, I'd be like the EJ Biggers of PlayStation 4.
Oh boy,
pretty bad. But
I bet that gamer tag is.
Would I be Dante Whitner? Shelby, what?
Careful behind you.
Oh,
Incoming.
what is that device?
I think I'd be Dante Whitner, like the old guy that has no business on the field.
Yeah. It's immediately evident that you shouldn't be playing with everybody else.
All right.
I'd probably be Albert Hainsworth. I would just lay down and be like, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
What video game was Mitch talking about?
I don't know, babe. We got to go.
Let's go to the interviews.
Let's go to the interviews. We'll start with Peter King, then Mike Norvell, and we're all Seminoles fans now, right? That guy's awesome.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
so
big
cool,
time.
so polite and smart and genuine.
Yeah. And then Stephania Bell. Mitch did a killer job with that. One more time, thank you to the good folks, Oarsman Automotive of Virginia. We ride with them. Want you to do the exact same thing. Good to be back potting. We'll be back, twice a week, back to normal now. Plenty to discuss going forward. Thanks for listening. Always a pleasure to bring on Peter King, the Dean of Sports Football Writing in America. Peter, thank you very much. You had some awesome coverage from the draft, being embedded with Tampa from Brooklyn. Pretty remarkable. Here in Washington, though, the two biggest storylines to me were selecting Chase Young and trading Trent Williams. Your reporting all along said Chase Young was going to be the pick. How do you think the Redskins did? Did they make the right selection?
I think they did the smart thing, JP, because I really have felt this way all along. One of the great things about this draft this year is that people didn't have time to get sold anything. They didn't have time for snow jobs. And Washington did just what it should have done, which is to take the kind of pass rusher who could be a generational pass rusher. There's no guarantee of anything. Half the players in the first round are not going to be great. But in my opinion, this was no doubt the player they should have picked. They picked him, and good for them that they didn't overthink this.
Agreed. And you wonder if there had been that, the circuit of traveling road shows with pro days and everything else, if people start concocting different versions in their head. So Chase Young is story one. 1A is Trent Williams. And finally ending this saga. And to me, it's almost there's two things going on. How do you think they did just on the surface level of finally trading Trent Williams for a third rounder next year and a fifth round pick?
Well, the problem in the NFL today is that when everybody knows you have to trade somebody, people circle you like sharks in the water. There is no question that Trent Williams, at least in my opinion, that Trent Williams should have been worth the 40th pick in this draft. But if everybody knows you're going to trade him, and if everybody knows that you can't bring him back, even if you would want to, you can't bring him back. I mean, they're not going to give you what his market value is, and then you're going to get the 156th player in the draft, which they got, plus, probably a mid to late 2 next year, or late 3, next year. So, getting 156 and 92 for a guy who at his peak is a top 3 left tackle in the league, it's not enough. But at the end of the day, Washington really didn't have a better option.
I agree. And so here's the other part of the Trent trade. And I made the argument in a column I wrote earlier this week that it's more important than the actual Trent trade for the Redskins to trade Trent Williams to Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, knowing kind of the history between the Shanahan family and Dan Snyder and the Redskins organization. I think that is a bigger sign that Ron Rivera is firmly in control of the organization than almost anything else we've seen this offseason. And I know kind of the big picture of all that. I'm curious your reaction to that contention.
I'm going to disagree with you on this, JP, okay. For this reason. You can hate somebody, you can be mad at somebody, and you can think that, the Shanahan family can think Dan Snyder's an idiot and vice versa. But at the end of the day, if your best offer is a 5 this year and a 3 next year, then honestly, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, no, wait a second, take a 6 this year and a 4 next year from the Jets? I mean, you're just cutting off your nose to spite your face. And my feeling all along has been, and I heard that a lot. And I said, especially around the time when it was being bandied about where's Trent Williams going to go. I mean, we all thought I really thought he'd go to the Jets. I really did. But I think once they got Mekhi Becton, they basically said, we don't need a tackle as desperately as we did before then. Like, let's just say for the sake of argument that the Jets had taken CD Lamb, with their first-round pick, and then they had to go get a tackle. Well, then maybe Joe Douglas would have taken, let's say, the 68th pick in this draft, or whatever number they had, I think, in the third round. That maybe they would have taken that pick and then traded it, for Trent Williams. But the market got smaller as the draft went along. And that, I think, is really what ended up hurting Washington.
Especially when you saw the Browns, the Bucks, and the Jets all go with tackles there right at the top. Well, if without, trying to get your scouting report on a wide receiver from Liberty, were there any of the other players that the Redskins drafted that either a scout or one of your contacts said, oh, I like that pick?
A lot of people really like Antonio Gibson. A lot of people think he is a day one contributor for a good team in the NFL. Versatile back. And I think the one thing about that pick is that when I saw that pick, I said, Ron Rivera has always loved the running game and always, he does not want his quarterback. He doesn't want this to be 63-37 pass run ratio. I think he wants it closer to 52-48. He wants to run the ball a lot. He wants to eat the clock and run the ball. And I think Antonio Gibson is going to have a chance to – he'll have a chance this year, in my opinion, even with Washington's got such an interesting running back situation, if you think about it. Because, look, you walk into camp and somebody's got to knock out Adrian Peterson. He's like Rocky Balboa in Rocky 1. No matter how many shots he took, man, that guy was not going to be knocked out. And that is kind of the same thing, I think, when I see Adrian Peterson year after year. And it's not like he's hanging on by a thread. He's still playing pretty good football. So, but I think what you get in Antonio Gibson is a good alternative to that. Every team needs 2 or 3 backs. A, they get hurt. B, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket at the running back position. I think he's going to be a valuable commodity for them.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because you got Darius Geis, Bryce Love,
Right.
All these younger guys coming back from injury and stuff. Peter, sincerely, thank you for your time, and always good to catch up with you. Get some rest. You deserve some.
Thanks a lot, JP. You have a good day.
It is a big-time pleasure to bring in the head coach of the Florida State Seminoles, Mr. Mike Norvell. Mike, thank you so much for taking time with us. Obviously, we want to ask you about Antonio Gibson, who you coached at Memphis last season and really had an explosive year. But let's start with just kind of where everything is for you as, you take over a new gig and then coronavirus happens. So how tough has everything been for you? How are you communicating with your guys and everything?
Yeah, it's been a challenge. I think for everybody involved in college football, really for our country in general. But like I told our team, sometimes the greatest challenges you face will also bring the greatest blessings, and it's really forced us to find new ways to communicate. And we're all here, on Zoom right now. And a month ago I had no clue what Zoom was, and so
Right.
we're finding new ways to be able to operate. And things are going well. We're really proud of our guys for the way that they're working, and we're just like everybody else, excited to get back to what's normal. And but we're definitely gonna learn some lessons through this experience.
Well, we are a Redskins podcast, obviously, but we're all college football nerds. And, I sure hope to see, Florida State football back and everybody chanting and everything fun that seems to happen down there in Tallahassee. Let's talk, though, about Antonio Gibson, because his story is pretty remarkable. There was hardly any production. Then all of a sudden he's just a home run hitter every time he touches the ball. Take us through kind of the success he had last season, and then we'll dive in deeper from there.
Yeah, Antonio is an incredible playmaker. In every aspect. With this last year, we were able to get the ball to him in a variety of different ways. We had a couple different things happen, injury-wise that really, kind of forced us into showcasing all of his versatility in each aspect. Patrick Taylor, who was our starting running back, coming into the season, got hurt and missed a majority of the season. And with Antonio's versatility, not only with what he did out on the perimeter as a receiver, but being able to get him into the backfield and to really kind of force feed him, some different touches and opportunities to impact the game. What he was able to do in special teams in the return game was remarkable. And he was just he was pretty special in every aspect. He's one of the toughest people that I've ever been around to tackle. He had so many yards after contact, and it's really contributed to a lot of those explosive plays that we saw. And there's no question he was one of the key key playmakers, and which led to a lot of our success last year at Memphis.
So you talked about him on the outside and then also in the backfield. He's kind of a running back, wide receiver. Where do you think you see him playing at the next level in the NFL?
I think I see him as a running back that has the ability to be able to flex out and do so many, really good things, in the slot. And, he's been a single receiver before, just in what we've asked him to do. So, I think the possibilities are endless in what he can accomplish. You look at our Memphis team over the last couple of years, he came in was such a dynamic player in special teams. His first year, we really had to play him. And we also had a situation where we had two NFL running backs that were, there, and Darrell Henderson and Tony Pollard, who both went on to, get drafted. I think they were two of the top 10 backs drafted the year prior. And then you had, Patrick Taylor, who was, one of the leading rushers in school history, also in the same backfield. So, really trying to find that role. And, Antonio did a really nice job of continuing to grow, continuing to develop. And, through those guys that went on to the NFL, and, it really opened up an opportunity for him to showcase all that he could do, and he definitely took advantage of the opportunity.
At a certain point, we'll be able to ask Ron Rivera and Scott Turner how they come up with their plan for Antonio, but you've done it before. So when you have somebody who's that versatile and that multifaceted, I mean, is it every week you're kind of going into it, okay, this is how we're going to use him, or is it by the game flow and then you see, oh, we can use him on this linebacker? So just kind of explain what it goes into as a coach when you have somebody like Antonio on your offense.
Well, the thing that made Antonio so special is the way that he truly approached the preparation of each week. And, he knew that he was going to be utilized a lot of different ways. And so whether it was, in the slot, in the backfield, he spent a lot of time in his preparation of getting ready to do that. But really, like I said, the possibilities are endless. And, we were able to adapt in games. If we went a series or a quarter without getting him a ball, we knew we could just bring him into the backfield, whether it was motion him in or line him up there to guarantee a touch to allow him to impact the game in a variety of different ways. But we were also able to try to get him isolated in the best matchup possible by moving around there on the perimeter, which is with his ball skills and the things that he can do. It makes it a lot of fun calling plays with that guy out there.
Coach, I don't know how much you're familiar with kind of the Redskins roster, but they have a bunch of running backs. Were you surprised Antonio landed with Washington?
Not really. I mean, I think that regardless of your roster makeup, of wherever your depth or your talent might be, I mean, Antonio's a guy that I believe is a can't miss. I mean, he's going to impact a roster no matter where he went, no matter what the role. I did get to see some of Coach Rivera's quotes about his special teams. Availability and explosiveness that he's going to bring. I mean, I think it's a home run draft pick because he's going to bring so many different talents to that football team. And everybody points to what he does when the ball's in his hands, but when you watch the tape and you see the impact he makes when the ball's not in his hands, he's a very physical player. He'll block. He'll do the dirty work in all phases of special teams, and so he's going to have an extremely long NFL career. And I'm excited that he is coming into a system where it's not necessarily all thrown on him to have to learn in every aspect of what he's doing, but he's going to be able to come in and they're going to be able to formulate a role for what they want for him to do at the very beginning, and then continue to develop in that. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch him on that Redskins roster.
the Redskins have struggled a lot in special teams over the past long time, we'll say. They need some guys with some speed and some electricity in the kick and punt return game. What does he do? What does he do best?
He's fearless with the ball in his hands. He is. You watch him in a return game. He's so tough to tackle. I mean, you got a guy that's almost 230 pounds that's running sub 4.4. But he's people bounce off of him, and it didn't matter who we played, where we played, when we played. I mean, he was gonna find ways to make people miss. And when he gets that 230 going downhill, it's pretty tough to bring down. And then obviously with just the elusiveness that he has, it's pretty special combination.
When you look back on your time with him in Memphis, is there one play that stands out that maybe our listeners can go pull up on YouTube or Twitter after this and see, okay, this is who we're going to get in burgundy and gold?
I think you need to go watch it. Go watch the SMU game. I mean, it was the first time in Memphis history that we had college game day there. We hosted it, national broadcast. It was 2 top 15 teams in the country, kicking it off for, I think at the time it was for sole possession of the West Division. So as big of an atmosphere as you could get. And in that game, Antonio Gibson had 3 plays over 70 yards, 1 rushing, 1 kickoff return, and a pass reception. I think he had 396 all-purpose yards in that game, which was a school record. And, that defines him because he had 3 touchdowns in 3 different ways. And just was such an incredible night on the biggest stage at the biggest moment. And so really kind of defines who he is and what he's all about.
Coach, surely there must have been something wrong with the Zoom here. Did I hear 396 all-purpose yards?
Yeah, that's after when I was sitting there after the game and they told me what that number was. I thought there was something wrong with my ears. He was, but it was probably the finest performance I've ever been a part of from a single game. And you see guys that get hot, whether it's as a pass receiver or kind of get in the zone as a running back, but to be able to impact it in that way, to have, I think he had a 99-yard touchdown return or kickoff return. He had a 70-yard touchdown run, which I think he made 14 people miss. I don't know. I think a few of them came off the sideline, so it was unbelievable. But and then obviously had the big touchdown reception. So I mean it was a special performance, and I think that was one of the really kind of the coming out party. We knew that we had somebody special there on our roster, and he was doing great things. But to do that on a national broadcast on ABC, it was pretty good in prime time.
Coach, I want to let you go. I was taking some notes here, but quickly, the only kind of hurdle for him to overcome, I'm guessing, especially as it pertains to the wideout position in the NFL, it's kind of the technical side, like route running and route tree, all that sort of stuff? Or do you think, is he proficient enough already?
He's got such a great skill set that, I mean, obviously everybody's going to continue to develop to what you're being asked to do. And, Antonio is a worker. He's going to work at whatever you put in front of him. So I'm not really worried about his development in any real aspect. What makes him special is his versatility. So, the more versatile things that you're asking them to do, it's to specialize in one area. He's just going to continue to grow, and he's going to put in the work to get that done. But I'm definitely excited for him. I texted him, right whenever his name was called, and just told him I don't know if I've ever been more proud of a young man, the journey that he had. He was a very, very selfless player as a junior. I mean, you're sitting there with some guys that are all Americans, guys that are getting all the praise, and he's really doing a lot of the dirty work, in special teams, and not really getting all the recognition for what the talent that he had, just because of the talent of our team. And the next year he got his opportunity, and he capitalized on it in every phase. And so to see a young man have that progression in his career, Washington got not only a great player, but an incredible person, and couldn't be more proud for him.
That's great. We got to talk to him draft night, and his mom joined our Zoom interview, and she's from the DC area, and she told us a story that her mom, so Antonio's grandmother, was actually buried with a Redskins jersey. I mean, you can't write a story like that. It's just
great things happen to great people. And I'm going to tell you, I remember on the recruiting trip when I was talking with his mom and his sister, about what his future could be, and to see it play out the way that it did, to land in such a great place. It's going to be an incredible journey, and it's going to be fun to watch him.
We've talked so much about Antonio on
Mitch, you got one more?
Go ahead. Just real quick. We talked so much about Antonio on the field. What's he like off the field? What stands out to you about him away from the blue turf in Memphis?
He's got a servant's heart, and really that's one of the things that he's all about service, impacting others. It's in every area of he's just a special young man, and it's a guy that you want to cheer for, and that's why like I said, to see him have the success that he had, he always maintained a humble spirit, but wanted to help his teammates. Obviously wants to make an impact in everything that he does, but he does that. He does that not only with his play, but with his personality and the relationships that he builds.
Coach, thank you so much for your time. Whenever we get college coaches on, we always kind of end things by saying, yeah, I'm going to root for your team this fall. And a lot of times we're kind of lying. But since we all went to Maryland, and Maryland's now in the Big Ten, I'm rooting for the Noles. Go Noles.
Yeah. Sold.
Well, I tell you what, man, we'll definitely take it, and we make it up. We make it up into Maryland, and we'll spend a good amount of time there recruiting. So anybody you want to send down this way, we'll take them.
We'll see you in the Orange Bowl in no time.
Yeah.
Drop us a line next time you're up here. We'll happily bring you in studio and do it all up. Charlie Ward is probably my favorite college football player ever, so I have a soft spot in my heart for the Noles.
Well, he's definitely a great one. He was one of my favorites growing up as well. And, the very first day I had the job, I got a chance to, he actually called me, and I was on my way to a high school to go recruit. And it just so happens to be the high school that he coaches at. And I actually met him in the parking lot. Unbelievable person. And he's a good one. He's a good one as well.
Very
Peter
cool.
Warwick is probably the best receiver to ever play in college football, or one of them.
Yes, indeed. Hopefully we can get a couple more down here. So,
yeah, there you go.
All right, you guys have a great day, okay?
Thanks very much, Coach. Looking forward
you.
to getting rocking down there in Tallahassee. Thanks again.
Thank you, sir.
We are so pleased to be joined by Stephania Bell, injury expert analyst for ESPN. She's been behind the scenes with Alex Smith and his family for Project 11, which airs Friday night at 7:30. Stephania, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about this project. How did you get involved, and how much time have you been spending with Alex and the family?
Well, the shorter answer is how much time we've been spending together, because really I got involved around January of 2019. Alex's injury was in November of 2018. So we started working together a couple months later, and we've been working together ever since. So, pretty close to a year and a half now. And how I got involved is really kind of a circular story, but the short version is that I, like everyone else, saw that Alex went down with an injury and understood that he had a pretty significant fracture. The minute I heard it was a compound fracture, meaning it was open, there would be exposure to things. You always worry about the risk of infection. And so as we sort of heard that Alex had been in the hospital for a while with an infection, I expected that was likely the result of that fracture, but I really didn't know any details, nor did anyone. And I was just going to say that while Alex was, in the hospital, once he got through really the scary part of his stay and was pretty much past the infection, he was talking with head team physician, Dr. Robin West, who really has overseen his care through everything, and asking her, who he could talk to or who he should call or look to who had dealt with something like this. And she said, there really isn't any other athlete that she was aware of that had ever been through something as drastic as his situation. And in the course of that conversation, she said, you might want to think about documenting what you're doing. And I think he started thinking about that and thought, for a couple of reasons. One is, I think, for himself and for his kids, and just to sort of see how you evolve when you're coming back from something like that, but also to create a roadmap for the next person. Not that you'd wish it on anyone, but should somebody come along with a similar injury, he wanted to say, you know, maybe it'll inspire somebody else. And Dr. West and I know each other from being medical colleagues for years. And so she said to him, you know, I think I have the person who could do this and tell it the right way. So hopefully that was a good choice. We'll see.
Locally, obviously, we think of Joe Theismann and the injury that he had. How bad was Alex's injury?
You know, it's I haven't seen the x-rays or images of Joe Theismann's injury. I remember watching it live when it happened. That was in the day when they showed it over and over again. And it was really, I think for all of us who watched it live, that was about the most horrific thing we'd seen. I'm not sure if you're aware, it also happened on November 18th. So then to see Alex go down, you know, it didn't look, we see tibial fractures in the league. It's a high energy game with big bodies moving at fast speed. So you're going to see that, but it's not that often that you get an open injury where the bone pokes through the skin. And on top of that, this was a very complex fracture. It wasn't a break. You know, you think of like a break across the bone usually. This was a spiral fracture. So it really rotates up. And it literally went from just about his ankle all the way up to just about his knee. And he's a tall guy. So that's a long fracture rotationally around the bone, causing some splintering. And so just from a repair perspective, that was more difficult. But the subsequent infection complicated it so much more that, and as people will see when they hopefully watch it, it's hard to describe just how compromised he was after that infection.
So not only did both injuries happen on November 8th, but the final score of both games was 23-21. Both
I did not know about the final score.
Crazy
That's
parallels
really,
between the two.
crazy, right?
How in this day and age does an infection get as bad as Alex has got?
You know, I think it's a fair question because people think, well, can't you tell? But and again, I don't want to give away all the things that are in the piece, but I think there are certain bacteria that can move with an amazing, they can strike rapidly and they multiply rapidly and they're gone, you know, and they start to spread. And part of it is, you know, when you have a big surgery like that, you can get an infection. Some very common in the hospital to get urinary infections, for example. There could be all kinds of things. It's not uncommon for someone to develop a low-grade infection just in the course of being ill or having treatment. But his was a particular type of bacteria. This is how they traced it back to the field. This bacteria only found in brackish water. And so it was a wet field with dirty clothing. There was a piece of dirty sock that had gotten into his wound. And even though they treated it within hours, by the time he was off the field and into the OR and cleaned out, these things are microscopic. A few of them can hang around in there. And once they start multiplying, it's tough to catch up.
How has Alex's demeanor been since the time you joined him, I guess, in January until today?
Consistent, remarkably consistent. It probably doesn't surprise people who've covered him or people who know him. But for me, and I had heard this and I followed his career because I'm from the Bay Area, so I followed him since he was with the 49ers. You kind of saw that publicly, but it's one thing to have that demeanor publicly. It's quite another to carry it privately. And he's kind and he's soft-spoken, but very determined and competitive to go along with that. So even though he's a little more reserved in his demeanor, that shouldn't fool anyone. He's as competitive as they come and humble and appreciative. You know, he's a very grateful person who expresses this all the time. And you would think that someone would have a lot of whining to do after what happened to him. And I never heard it. I literally never heard it. And if anything, he was appreciative for his family who was there. I mean, without the family he has, I don't think he gets through it the same way. He was appreciative for all the medical staff. They've all become really good friends. It's great to see. And appreciative of all the support that he's gotten from friends and teammates. So just a very consistent demeanor. And when you see the peaks and valleys that he's been through, it's hard to imagine that being possible.
Yeah, well, you mentioned his family. I know, I think on Friday you have an article coming out about the whole saga from his wife, Liz's perspective. What has been the impact on his wife and kids?
You know, I think credit to Elizabeth, the kids have been relatively unfazed. You know, I watched the kids interact with him when he was first home, and he had the big external fixator that keeps the bone in place. And it's like a big cage, we call it, around his leg. And the kids just, you know, they worked around it. You know, they were very protective of their dad early on. They made sure people didn't get too close. They pushed him in his wheelchair. I mean, they were always involved. And so, and I think that Elizabeth protected them from obviously the most frightening stuff that was in the hospital. But you can just see that they have such a good family bond throughout. The kids seem to have been relatively unfazed. Elizabeth might be the hero in this story. You know, as much as Alex has been through, the one who carried the emotional burden when he was frankly incoherent during much of that week where he was fighting the infection because of all the medication he was on. Elizabeth is the one who's processing the information from the doctors and worried constantly about making the right decision. You know, he was in a mode where they were concerned about saving his life, but they were also talking about whether to save his leg or not, and whether sacrificing his leg might be the thing that could save his life. And just for her to have to absorb that and manage that and still be a mom to her kids and make sure that they knew everything was okay. And I think one thing that's hard to appreciate, you know, there was a lot of media curiosity at the time. And understandably, I mean, he is a public figure and people were concerned. But, you know, as Elizabeth pointed out to me, I've got 3 kids who are in school, and I don't want them hearing things that will scare them from other people when at that point things were touch and go and they didn't even know what was going to happen. So that was part of the reason that they really kind of kept their circle close and then wanted to tell their story when it was more complete, if you will.
Did you see the picture of Alex and the shark bite with his kids?
Yes. Yes.
For us, you know, we haven't heard a lot from Alex, but that was, you know, our first sign that like he was, you know, handling this well and was able to have some fun with it. For you, was there one moment that you were there that you kind of were like, okay, I'm confident that he's, you know, mentally and physically going to, you know, recover from this?
It's interesting because I was with him so much, you know, we spent so much time over a year and a half that I don't know there was one moment where I mean, really, it was not long after meeting. I met him early on. I met him in January, as I said. And he was still, you know, he was very thin. He'd lost a lot of weight in the hospital. He was very pale. And I felt the uncertainty then. I think that when we saw each other was the following, you know, maybe a few weeks later, and we went down to San Antonio to the San Antonio Military Medical Center, and the rationale for that is explained in the piece. But that interaction and spending time with him there, I knew he was going to be okay. And there's a scene, you know, in there during that visit where he touches a football for the first time, and it is. That was, we all saw it. There was something like a kid, the way he lit up. And I think him also acting with the wounded soldiers and just seeing other people who he could relate to, who had these big cages on their leg, like he did. You know, this is just not something you see in the sports world. So he didn't have anyone to talk to and relate to. And I think when he got there and he was able to have those conversations and he could see progress that other people had made, there was definitely a confidence that came around in him that wasn't there the first time we met.
I saw that scene where he throws the football for the first time and his legs kind of propped up on a knee, and you just kind of see the smile come across his face as he's getting ready to throw it.
And nobody do that, somebody, I was asked this morning, I'm doing all these interviews, somebody was asking me, like, oh, really, there was a football? I'm like, yes, in physical therapy facilities, you have all kinds of toys. You have, and you got to remember, soldiers are athletes too. I mean, they are perhaps our best athletes. And we were talking about special forces, and they've got to get back to doing everything. And so sports is a big rehab tool. And if somebody likes a particular sport, you try to integrate it as early as you can. Something as simple as holding a ball, much less throwing it, can be a great rehab tool. So it was just sort of this organic moment, but it was fabulous.
From that moment, seeing him throw the football for the first time last year, we saw him doing some workouts in Ashburn at the Redskins facility, pushing the sleds and parachute and with the big sock kind of on his leg. How far has he progressed in his recovery?
It's nothing short of remarkable. I mean, he, when I saw him, he could barely put weight on that leg. Now he's running, and you can see him running outside, and his leg will never be the same as the leg that he had pre-injury. He knows that. I mean, anatomically, it's not the same, so it can't be identical. But skilled athletes have ways of compensating for injuries, and he's had to learn how to draw strength from other places to compensate for weaknesses in that leg. And at the end of the day, performance is what matters. Can you do what you need to do to execute at your position? Can you do what you need to do to be safe at your position? And those are the things that really matter. So I would say, watching him now doing the drills that he's doing, and every time I'm with him, every time we would film something, every time we would get together, I would tell him this. I'd be like, you're blowing me away. Like every time, waiting for the time that you don't do that. And every time he was just making such progress. And I think when you see someone in those, intermittent periods, you can really appreciate the gains where he feels like his gains are small day to day. But if I had any doubts, and I'm not really sure that I did, it was just more unknown. But if I did have them, he has eliminated them, because I really think there's, at this point, anything he puts his mind to, he can do.
Well, certainly at first we were concerned, about kind of just being able to get back to living, a normal life, right, and being able to interact with his kids and family and walk around and all that. He's obviously put that behind him. I guess it's the $1 million or $20 million question. You think Alex will be able to play again? Football, professionally?
Like I said, who am I to doubt Alex Smith ever? That's my main takeaway after spending the last year and a half with him. And, there are a lot of things that are out of our control, including current circumstances. So it's hard to say because everything feels askew right now. But do I believe he can play professional football again? I think we're going to see him back on the field at some point. I would not be surprised at all. It's crazy, right?
Right.
But I again, and that isn't. Let's be clear. If he didn't, he'll be fine. Like, this guy will be fine either way. His recovery to what was most important to him was to be back being a dad and a good husband, and to be able to play with his kids. And like you said, we know he's doing that, so he'll be fine. But he's also a driven competitor. And I think there's a part of him that really wants to prove it to himself that he can do this again. And he said, he wouldn't want to be out there as a token representation. He would only want to do it if he felt like he could compete.
Well, thank you so much. We're so excited to see Project 11 Friday night at 7:30 on ESPN. This is with Stephania Bell. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited for you all to see it too.